Welcome to my channel. Please support with subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin tonight's story. It was one of those quiet autumn evenings in Vermont, when the air smelled of pine and the faint sweetness of pumpkin pie still lingered after dinner. The table was still warm from the laughter that had filled the room, laughter that had covered, maybe too well, the silence that had been building between Laura and her son, Ethan. Laura was a single mother, in her mid-40s, gentle but strong in ways she didn't always notice. Life hadn't been kind to her lately. The house felt bigger than it used to, emptier too. Her husband had passed away years ago, and ever since, dinners felt more like a duty than a joy. But tonight, something felt different. Ethan had insisted on coming home from college for the weekend, saying he missed her cooking. That alone was enough to make Laura smile. The two of them ate together, talking about little things, his classes, the neighbors, how the maple trees outside had turned golden earlier this year. But beneath Ethan's easy words, Laura sensed something else, a hesitation, a thought he wasn't saying. When dinner ended, she began clearing the dishes, humming softly to herself, grateful for his company. "Hey, Mom," Ethan said suddenly, his voice quieter than before. Laura turned, holding a dish towel. I'll stay back a bit. You go ahead, I'll clean the rest." That caught her off guard. Ethan never offered to clean. She smiled faintly, curious. "That's sweet, honey. You sure?" He nodded, his eyes were focused on the table, as if trying to find the right words there. She watched him for a moment, then stepped out onto the porch. The sky was fading into a dark velvet blue, and somewhere far away, a train hummed through the valley. She stood there, arms folded, lost in thought. When she walked back inside, the kitchen was spotless, dishes washed, counters wiped, even the tablecloth folded neatly. Ethan was still sitting there, elbows on the table. Deep in thought, something about the moment made her heart tighten. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently, drying her hands. He looked up at her, and for the first time that evening, Laura saw that his eyes weren't just tired, they were searching. "Mom," he began, his voice breaking just slightly. "Can I ask you something personal?" The room went still. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old wall clock. "Of course," she said softly, sitting across from him. "You can ask me anything." He hesitated again. His fingers played with the edge of the napkin, folding it, unfolding it. "It's just," he sighed, "you've been alone for a long time." Laura blinked, unsure where this was going. "Alone?" He nodded slowly. "I mean, since Dad passed, you've taken care of everything, me, the house, the bills. You've never even gone out on a date." Her breath caught for a second. She hadn't expected that. "Ethan," she whispered, trying to find the right tone, half amusement, half discomfort. "Why are you asking me that now?" He shrugged lightly but didn't look away. "Because I worry about you. You deserve to be happy too." Laura smiled faintly, but her heart was trembling in a way she couldn't explain. Nobody had said those words to her in years. Happiness had become something she only gave, never something she expected. "That's sweet of you to say," she murmured, "but I'm fine. I have you." Ethan gave a small, tender smile, one that reminded her so much of his father it almost hurt to look at. "Mom," he said softly, "you've built your whole world around me, but one day, I'll have to build mine somewhere else. And when that happens, I don't want you to be alone." His words sank deep, like gentle rain on parched ground. Laura looked away, blinking fast. The kitchen light shimmered on the window pane, reflecting her face older. Yes, but still holding the same softness that used to make her husband pause mid-sentence. "You sound just like your father," she whispered. Ethan chuckled quietly. "I'll take that as a compliment." They both sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt heavy but honest. Then Ethan leaned forward, his voice a little unsteady. "Actually, there's more. That's not all I wanted to ask." Laura felt her heartbeat quicken. "Oh," he nodded. "There's something else, someone, actually." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Someone?" He took a deep breath, almost nervous. "Someone I met, and I think you should meet her." Laura smiled, relief washing over her. "Ah, so this is about you, not me," she teased gently. But Ethan didn't laugh. His face stayed serious. "It's kind of about both of us." That stopped her. She tilted her head, trying to read his expression. But there was something different there, something emotional, almost protective. "Ethan, what do you mean?" she asked softly. He hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the window where the faint reflection of their two faces hung in the glass. Mother and son, both carrying unspoken stories. Finally, he said, almost in a whisper, "She knows you. Actually, she used to know Dad too." Laura's hand froze mid-air. What? Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure how to bring it up. But she told me something I think you need to hear." The warmth of the kitchen suddenly felt colder. The ticking clock grew louder. Laura leaned forward, voice trembling. "Ethan, who is she?" He hesitated, looking straight into her eyes, the same eyes that had watched over him since the day he was born. "She's someone who knew things about our family I didn't," he said quietly. "And Mom. She told me something about Dad that might change everything." Laura felt her chest tighten as the room spun slightly around her. For years, she thought she had known everything about her late husband, his stories, his laughter, his dreams. But now, as her son's words hung in the air, she realized maybe she didn't know him at all. The room seemed smaller after those words. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence between them, and Laura could feel her pulse in her ears. She tried to smile, a mother's instinct to stay calm, to not let her child see her fear, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the chair. "Ethan, what are you talking about? What did she tell you?" He hesitated, lowering his gaze. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but she showed me something. An old letter. It was addressed to you, but it was never sent." Laura's breath caught. A letter? From who? From Dad. The name hit her like a quiet wave. For years, she had lived with the memory of her husband, Daniel, his laughter, his gentle teasing, his sudden absence. A car accident had taken him far too soon, leaving behind nothing but old photos and the echo of promises. Now, her son was sitting across from her, saying there was more, something she had never seen. "Ethan," she said softly, "how did this woman get that letter?" She said she worked with Dad, back when he was still with the construction company. "Her name is Claire Bennett. Do you remember her?" Laura frowned, thinking back. The name stirred, something faint. A face at an old company picnic, maybe brown hair, quiet smile, polite conversation. She had thought nothing of her back then. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I do. But that was years ago." Ethan nodded. "She told me she found the letter after he passed. It was in one of his old files. She said she didn't know if she should give it to you. But when she met me last month, and realized who I was, she thought it was time." Laura's voice shook. "And what did it say?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I didn't read all of it. I couldn't. It felt too personal, but from what I did see." He paused, searching her eyes. "It sounded like he was hiding something he meant to tell you but never got the chance." Laura's chest tightened. "Hiding something?" He nodded slowly. "Claire said he was planning to leave the company because of it, that he didn't want to keep living with a lie." The air between them thickened. For a long moment, neither spoke. Laura rose from her chair and walked to the window, the cold glass reflecting the faint moonlight. She pressed her hand against it, feeling the chill. "Your father was a good man," she whispered, half to herself. "He was honest. Whatever that letter said, it doesn't change who he was." Ethan stood up to, "I know, Mom. I'm not saying it does. But don't you want to know? Don't you need to know?" She turned, her eyes glistening. "Sometimes, Ethan, the truth hurts more than the lies ever could." He walked closer, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I think Dad wanted you to know the truth, Mom. That's why he wrote the letter." The warmth of his touch steadied her, but inside, her thoughts were spinning. What truth could Daniel have hidden? After all these years, after all the love they'd shared, what could possibly still be unknown? Finally, Laura nodded. "Where is the letter now?" Ethan hesitated. "Claire still has it. She wanted to give it to you herself." Laura's heart sank. "She wants to see me." "Yeah," he said carefully. "She asked if she could come by tomorrow. I told her I'd ask you first." "Tomorrow." The word felt heavy. She turned back toward the window, watching the moonlight stretch across the dark yard. It was strange, after all these years of quiet evenings. One conversation had pulled the past right back into her kitchen. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. "All right, Ethan. If she thinks I need to hear it, I'll listen." He smiled faintly, relieved. "Thank you, Ma." But as he walked away to his room, Laura stayed by the window. Her reflection looked older somehow, weary, uncertain. The thought of seeing Claire Bennett again stirred emotions she didn't expect: confusion, curiosity, even a quiet ache. There had been something in the woman's eyes all those years ago, something she hadn't paid attention to. Now, she wished she had. The next morning, the sun rose quietly over the Vermont hills. Laura barely slept. Every creak of the house made her heart jump by noon. The doorbell rang. When she opened the door, there she was, Claire Bennett. Older now, with faint lines around her eyes, but the same calm expression. She held a small brown envelope in her hands. "Hello, Laura," she said softly. "It's been a long time." Laura nodded, keeping her voice steady. "Yes, it has." Claire smiled faintly. "I didn't mean to disturb your peace, but I think you deserve to know the truth." Laura's eyes fell to the envelope. "That's the letter." "Yes," Claire said, holding it gently. "Daniel wrote it the night before the accident." Laura felt her breath falter. "He wrote it that night." Claire nodded slowly. "He was troubled. He told me he was finally going to tell you everything." The letter trembled slightly in Claire's hands. Laura reached for it, her fingers brushing the edge, and for a second, both women's eyes met. There was something there, something unspoken, a secret that had been buried too long. "I think it's time you read it," Claire whispered. Laura took the envelope slowly, feeling the weight of it. It was light, yet heavier than anything she had ever held. Inside, a folded piece of paper waited the final words of a man she once loved more than life itself. Her hands shook as she began to open it. The paper felt fragile between. Laura's fingers yellowed at the edges, carrying that faint smell of old ink and time. Her heart pounded as she unfolded it, each crease whispering memories she thought she'd buried years ago. Ethan stood quietly near the doorway, watching her. Claire sat across from her at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes downcast. For a moment, Laura just stared at the handwriting. Daniel's handwriting, neat, steady, familiar. The loops of his letters, the way he crossed his T's, it felt like seeing a ghost. Finally, she began to read aloud. "My dearest Laura, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage I should have had long ago. I've loved you with every part of my soul, but there's something I never told you, not because I wanted to lie, but because I was afraid it would break the beautiful life we built together. Before I met you, there was someone else, a woman named Claire. We worked together for years. We were close to close. Maybe it ended before you and I began, but it left behind something I never expected, a mistake that's haunted me ever since." Laura's hands began to tremble. She looked up at Claire, her eyes wide, but Claire didn't meet her gaze. Ethan stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, maybe you shouldn't," but Laura shook her head. "No, I need to know." She continued reading. "A few months before I met you, Claire told me she was pregnant. She never asked for anything. She disappeared before I could make sense of it. I tried to find her once, but when she didn't respond, I thought maybe it was best to let the past stay buried. I never wanted to bring that pain into our marriage." The words blurred for a moment as Laura's eyes filled with tears. Her mind raced. A child. She forced herself to keep reading. "I love you, Laura. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. But you deserve to know the truth. There might be another child out there, someone who carries my name, my blood. I was going to tell you tonight, after dinner. I just hope, somehow, you'll forgive me for waiting too long." Laura lowered the letter slowly, her breath shallow. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of that same old clock, the same one that had filled her kitchen the night before. Finally, she looked at Claire. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Is it true?" Claire's eyes glistened. "Yes." Laura's hand tightened around the paper. "You had a child with my husband." Claire nodded slowly. "A daughter. Her name is Emily. She's 22 now." Laura closed her eyes. Her whole body felt heavy, like the world had tilted just a little too far. Ethan stood frozen, trying to process it. "So, I have a sister." Claire nodded again, tears now spilling down her cheeks. "Half-sister, yes. And she doesn't know any of this. I never told her. But when I met you, Ethan, and saw how much you looked like your father, I couldn't keep the truth hidden anymore." Laura turned away, her throat tight. "All these years," she whispered, "all those anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, and he carried this secret." Claire's voice trembled. "He wanted to tell you, Laura. He really did. The night of the accident, he came to my house first. He said he was going home to confess everything to you." Laura froze. "Wait, he came to your house?" Claire nodded. "Yes. He told me it was time to end the guilt. That he couldn't keep living two lives, one in his heart and one on paper." The words hit Laura like thunder. 2 lives. She stared down at the letter again, her mind spinning. She remembered that night, the phone call that never came, the storm that rolled through town, the flashing lights on the highway. Daniel had been on his way home. All these years, she thought he'd been working late. Now she knew where he had been. Her eyes filled again. This time not with grief, but something deeper, betrayal mixed with heartbreak. Tangled with the faint echo of love, Ethan reached for her hand. Mom. She looked at him, forcing a small, fragile smile. I'm okay, she whispered, though she wasn't sure she was. She turned back to Claire. Why now? Why tell us after all these years? Claire hesitated. Because I couldn't carry it anymore. And because Emily, she's starting to ask questions about her father. She deserves to know the truth too. Laura leaned back in her chair, her heart aching with 1,000 unspoken words. She looked down at the letter again, at Daniel's handwriting, at the man she'd loved, the man she thought she knew. There were no more words to read, no more answers left on the paper, only silence. Finally, she whispered, Where is she? Where's Emily now? Claire took a slow breath. She's here. She came with me. She's outside in the car. Laura's eyes widened. Ethan stepped back, stunned. She's here. Claire nodded softly. She wanted to meet you, but I told her we'd wait until you were ready. Laura stood, her heart pounding again, not from anger now, but from something else. A mix of fear, confusion, and a faint, strange curiosity. Through the kitchen window, she could see the faint outline of a young woman sitting in the passenger seat of a blue car, looking down at her hands. Claire stood quietly. Would you like me to bring her in? Laura hesitated. Her whole world had just been rewritten in a few minutes, yet, somehow, a part of her wanted to open that door, to see this person who was both a stranger and, in some way, family. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Yes, bring her in. As Claire walked toward the door, Ethan turned to his mother. Mom, are you sure? Laura nodded slowly. If there's truth left to face, I'd rather face it now. She looked out the window again as the car door opened. A young woman stepped out, her hair catching the sunlight, her posture uncertain, but graceful. And in that instant, Laura saw something that made her chest tighten. The way the girl moved, the way she glanced toward the house. It was the same way Daniel used to, cautious, kind, thoughtful. For the first time in years, Laura felt something she hadn't felt since Daniel died. The beginning of closure, or maybe, the beginning of another chapter. The front door creaked softly as Claire stepped back inside, her voice low but steady. Laura, she said gently, this is Emily. The young woman stepped into the house, her eyes wide and uncertain, holding the strap of her bag like it was keeping her grounded. Laura felt her breath catch. Emily was beautiful, not in a striking, movie-perfect way, but in that quiet, familiar way that stirred something deep inside. Her eyes were the same warm brown as Daniel's, her smile hesitant, her posture polite but shy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Ethan stood beside his mother, equally still. Finally, Laura found her voice soft, trembling. Hello, Emily. Hi, Emily replied, almost whispering. Her voice carried that nervous warmth of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 100 times but still wasn't ready for it. I wasn't sure if I should come in. Laura shook her head gently. No, I'm glad you did. Emily's eyes glistened. I didn't want to upset anyone. I just wanted to meet you. I've heard about you my whole life. Laura's brows furrowed softly. You have? Emily nodded. Mom used to tell me about a woman my dad once worked with. How kind she was. How he always said she was the most genuine person he'd ever met. I didn't know it was you until a few weeks ago. Laura's throat tightened. Your father said that. Emily smiled faintly. Yes, she told me he cared about you deeply. He just didn't know how to make peace with his past. The words hit harder than Laura expected. She had imagined anger, betrayal, but not this tenderness. Not this quiet understanding. Claire stood silently by the door, watching the two women, the mother who had lost, and the daughter who had been hidden. Ethan finally broke the silence. So, you really are my sister? Emily turned to him and smiled through her nerves. Half-sister, I guess. But, yeah. He chuckled softly, running a hand through his hair. That's wild. I always wanted a sibling. Guess I got one 20 years late. Emily laughed lightly, the tension breaking just a little. Better late than never. Laura watched the two of them, her chest tightening again, but this time, not from pain, from something else, something tender and new. She looked at Claire, who still stood by the door, guilt etched across her face. You should sit down, Laura said quietly. Claire hesitated. Are you sure? Laura nodded. We've all kept enough distance for a lifetime. It's time to stop. They all sat around the same kitchen table where, just the night before, Laura's life had still felt familiar. Now it felt like a different world. There was an uneasy quiet. Then Laura spoke again, her tone steady but kind. Claire, I need to ask you something. Did Daniel ever know about Emily after she was born? Claire looked down at her hands. No. I left town when I found out I was pregnant. I was scared. He'd moved on, and you two had already started seeing each other. I didn't want to ruin his happiness, so I raised Emily on my own. Laura sighed. And all this time, you never thought to tell me. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. I did. So many times. But every time I tried, I couldn't. You had a good life. A happy family. I didn't want to break it. Laura leaned back, her fingers brushing the edge of the old letter. You didn't break it. Life did. Secrets just made the cracks deeper. No one said anything after that. The words hung in the air, honest and heavy. After a moment, Ethan spoke softly, looking between his mother and sister. Maybe this is our chance to fix those cracks. Laura looked at him, her son, the reason she'd held herself together all those years. His calmness, his quiet empathy, it was something Daniel would have been proud of. She turned back to Emily. Do you know much about your father? Emily shook her head. Only stories. I've seen pictures, the ones Mom had from work, but I don't really know him. That's why I came. I wanted to know what kind of man he really was. Laura smiled sadly. He was a good man. Imperfect, yes, but good. He loved deeply, sometimes too deeply, and he loved his family more than anything. Emily's eyes softened. That's all I wanted to know. There was something so pure in her expression that Laura felt her heart twist again. She reached across the table, slowly, and placed her hand over Emily's. The young woman froze for a moment, then smiled a trembling, grateful smile, and squeezed back. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Claire wiped her eyes quietly. Thank you, Laura. I didn't expect forgiveness, but thank you for giving us this chance. Laura looked at her, her voice quiet but sincere. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive everything, Claire, but I'm ready to move forward. For them, for all of us. Ethan leaned back, exhaling softly. This is a lot, but maybe it's a new start. Laura nodded. Yes, maybe it is. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. The air wasn't filled with silence anymore, it was filled with possibility. Outside, the late afternoon light streamed through the kitchen window, turning everything gold. Laura looked at Emily again, and a gentle warmth spread through her chest, not the love she once had for Daniel, but a new kind of love, a love born from truth, pain, and forgiveness. But before she could say anything, Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. There's something else I wanted to show you, she said softly. She handed it to Laura. It was a photograph, faded, slightly torn at the edges of Daniel, smiling, holding a tiny baby in his arms. Laura's heart stopped. When was this taken? Claire looked up, startled. I've never seen that before. Emily frowned. I found it in one of Mom's old boxes. I thought you might know. Laura stared at the picture, her hands trembling. Daniel was wearing the same shirt he'd worn the week before their wedding, and behind him, the background wasn't a hospital or an office. It was their home. Ethan leaned closer, confused. Wait, Mom, that's our living room. Laura felt her knees weaken. No, that's impossible. That can't be right. Claire's voice shook. Laura, are you saying he was here with Emily? Laura looked at the photo again, her pulse racing. The old clock on the wall, the worn-out couch, there was no doubt. Daniel had held that baby in their house, which meant he had known all along. The photograph trembled in Laura's hand as silence filled the room. No one moved, even the air seemed to pause, as if the house itself was waiting for her to breathe again. She stared at the image, her late husband, Daniel, standing in their old living room, smiling tenderly as he held a tiny baby in his arms. The same baby who was now sitting across from her. Mom, Ethan whispered, his voice uncertain. Does this mean Dad knew? Laura swallowed hard. Her voice came out soft, broken. Yes, he knew. He must have known. Claire's face went pale. But he told me he never saw her. He swore he didn't. Laura looked at her, eyes glistening. Maybe he lied to both of us. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Claire's lips parted, but no words came. For a moment, no one spoke. Just the faint hum of the wind outside, brushing against the windows. Ethan reached for the photo gently, studying it. He looks happy, he said quietly. Not guilty, just peaceful. Laura nodded slowly. He was holding part of himself. Maybe, for that one moment, he felt whole. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan's arm went around her shoulders. Claire wiped her eyes. Laura, I had no idea he came here. I swear I didn't. If I had known, I would have told you. Laura shook her head. It doesn't matter anymore. The truth found its way to us, one way or another. She turned back to Emily, who sat silently, eyes wide and full of emotion. I think, Laura whispered, your father wanted this. Not the lies, not the pain, but this moment. The four of us sitting together, finally knowing everything. Emily's lips trembled. I used to imagine what it would be like to meet him, she said softly. Now, I feel like I am through you. Laura's heart broke and healed all at once. She reached across the table, taking Emily's hand in hers. You don't have to imagine anymore, she said. You're part of this family now. You always were, we just didn't know it. Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks as she smiled. Thank you. Ethan smiled faintly too, still holding the photo. You know, maybe he didn't mean to hide this forever. Maybe he was waiting for the right time, and it just never came. Laura looked at her son, her pride swelling quietly. He would have been proud of you, Ethan, for how calm you've been through all this. He smiled gently. You taught me that, Mom. You always said love doesn't end when the truth hurts, it just changes shape. She laughed softly through her tears. Did I really say that? Yeah, he said with a grin. When I was 10, and I accidentally broke Dad's old watch. They all chuckled softly, even Claire, through her tears. For a brief, fragile moment, the room filled with warmth again. Laura looked around the kitchen. The same kitchen where she'd shared countless dinners, countless quiet evenings, and she realized something. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just a new chapter. The truth had hurt, yes, but it had also given her something precious, connection, a son who loved her deeply, a daughter she never knew she had, and a second chance to see her late husband not as a perfect man, but as a flawed one who had loved imperfectly, yet sincerely. She took a deep breath. Claire, she said softly, I don't know what happens next, but I think we can all agree, Daniel's story doesn't end with secrets anymore. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, it ends with honesty. Emily smiled faintly. And maybe, it begins with family. Laura reached out, holding both Emily's and Ethan's hands across the table. Yes, family. The three of them sat there quietly, the past, the present, and the future, all woven together in one fragile moment of peace. Outside, the wind rustled through the golden Vermont trees, and for the first time in years, Laura felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. She glanced at the photograph one last time before placing it gently on the table. Rest now, Daniel, she whispered. We finally understand. And as the light faded into evening, laughter slowly returned to that little kitchen, soft at first, but real, like the sound of hearts learning to forgive. The end.